Okay, so hopefully you guys have sound now. So we're gonna try that again.
All right, right on. Why not? It was just
Oh,
a sound check.
that was a sound
Yeah,
check.
that was a sound check.
Shit. So we're gonna try that again. Yep, you got sound. I can tell. I can hear it. So welcome to the inaugural episode of Kansas City Legends by Caffeine on the Kansas City Alternative Podcast Network. My name is Jason or JB, depending on what community you know me in. This is a interview series where we are interviewing people that I consider to be legends in a vast array of communities.
Oh, cool.
And when I was putting the series together, I thought, who is my first guest? And immediately I said, Athens, because you do so much in the community, and I've seen you in so many different places, and I've seen you bridge gaps in the community and bring different communities that really are the chocolate and the peanut butter of communities, and you brought them together.
For sure, for sure.
And such an inspiring figure as far as I'm concerned. And I wanted people to know who you were, who didn't know. So for those who don't know, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell these people who you are?
Well, I'm Sir Athens on FetLife, and I'm Mark Athens on Facebook. I've been in the community for roughly 7 years. Probably most notably known for fire play is probably what I get asked about the most. But I flag black on the left, which is sadomasochist, and yeah, just very dirty things. I've been seen as a community activist. I like to go out publicly in my leathers and educate people. I've had a lot of opportunities to lead in Kansas City, which has taught me so much about just people and how they feel about what it is that we do both in and outside of the lifestyle, which has been really cool.
So I want to get into the True Hollywood story of Mark Athens. Are you originally from Kansas City, or are you a transplant?
So I am originally from Kansas City. I came about Kansas City roughly when I was 9 years old.
Okay.
So that's really most of where my experience in life came from, was here in Kansas City. Was originally born in Ark City, which is a small itty bitty town down south that has a slaughterhouse and maybe a grocery store.
That makes so much more. Like now, I'm starting to put the pieces together of Athens.
Yeah. So when I came to Kansas City, I remember very distinctly being blown away about how many people are in Kansas City. Got into the public school system, and so it was a very diverse culture. And did the normal grow up in America, play sports, leadership, debate, all the good things, and then grew out of that and went to college. So that's kind of where my vanilla life background comes from. Parents were teachers at one point. And most of my family are teachers, so it's a very structured, very religious type household. My dad was in the military for many years, so I got a lot of structure at a very early age, and a lot of just truth on how the world works.
So I think it's interesting that you grew up in a military household.
Yeah.
Because that does give a lot of structure. I grew up also in a military household.
So you know exactly what
I know exactly what you're talking
about.
My dad was 20-year Air Force, 20-year Air Force, 5-year Army. So
cool.
I definitely understand that military background.
Yeah.
I think it does. So how do you feel like that that involves in your kink?
Well, for me, my dad was a 2-time Vietnam vet. So when I grew up, a lot of it was about just respect. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Here's how you order your room. Here's how you keep it clean. Here's how you detail your car. Everything was very structured in that format. So a lot of the formality that I incorporate in my kinky life is from that upbringing.
Okay.
Which is, you always respect your elders, those who've come before you. You listen to them and you adopt what they did and hopefully improve upon it. and you give very clear and concise direction, and you speak articulately and things like that. And if you, God help you, if you don't use yes sir or no sir.
Listen.
So that was a very real thing to me, was just the structuring aspect. So a lot of the discipline in BDSM comes from that, from those experiences for me.
And do you feel like those, because I can see the similarities in the military lifestyle,
For sure.
and BDSM and the kink lifestyle. Do you think that like across the board there's kind of that structure
Absolutely.
and that?
Absolutely. So a lot of our first power exchange dynamics, if we wanted to look at it in that aspect, comes from when we were children. Mom and dad were everything. They were the top. They were the boss. That's where the buck ended. And so for me, that power exchange was with my mom and my dad. My dad was head of household. End of story. He did what dad said. And so his upbringing also came from the military. So a lot of how he felt to raise us as men or young men came from how do you instruct 18-year-olds to combat in war. So we're going to give you structure, we're going to give you direction, we're going to give you that unwavering question of you're going to do this.
See, and I think it's interesting because I had the exact opposite experience.
Okay, cool.
My dad was very kind of very military, very like when it was time to clock in.
Yeah,
he was on it.
I got you.
You know, but when he was off, leave me alone.
Really?
You know, and he had a very specific way that he wanted things done.
Mm-hmm,
but
sure.
My mom was head of household for lots of things, you know, and it was, you know, whatever your mom says is fine. Because I spend, you know, he was an MP. He was like, I spend most of my time doing, you know, having to train other people at my job. The last thing I want to do
is come home and train the kids.
Kids.
No, I get you.
You know, and so I am very, you know, and I remember I was planning on going to the military, and my dad was like,
that's the way my dad was too. Yep. No, he's like, son, you're going to college.
You're not doing that.
Yep.
He was like, because you ain't gonna make it. Not to think that that you wouldn't do well.
Right.
Somebody gonna get you. Yep. you're gonna say the wrong thing to somebody, and it's gonna be a problem. So don't do that.
For sure.
And I think that involves that, and it's going to lead into my next question, which is what got you into kind of kink? Like, what was your introduction into it? Not necessarily the community yet,
right?
But just kink in general.
So as long as I can remember, I was a pervert. As long as I can remember. So when I was growing up, the internet was coming back, or just coming out. We had like the old AOL where we had the crashes and the dial-up, and yeah, it was terrible. But as long as I can remember, I would like sneak on mom and dad's computer, and I would pull up like just random porn, and then you would run down the rabbit hole, and inevitably you would find somebody getting stomped into the ground or bound up or whatever the case might be. And for whatever reason, just the extreme intensity of it did it for me. Like that was the only kind of porn I wanted to look at. And so growing up, I remember distinctly when we started getting our own personal computers, I remember sneaking onto my little brother's computer to do it. Because if it crashed my brother's computer, he got in trouble, whereas I would be safe to do whatever. It was a terrible idea. It was a horrible thing. Don't do that, kids. But that was something that I always was into. Like, how depraved can we make it? We went from everything from bondage to discipline to cuttings to some of the snuff films that were out there.
Oh, yeah, you went like deep in the rabbit hole.
Deep down the rabbit hole, and that really formulated my interest in that particular style of sex. Had to bury it and suppress it for a great many years, honestly, until I started meeting my current partner, Athens. And that's where we started exploring some things.
Yes, and I love watching you two do things and really just interact, because you know she is so bubbly and bright and
all the time,
and like just what you would think of when you think of like just happy, right? You know, when you're like someone who wakes up happy and goes to bed happy, all the time. And then you see you guys do things or do scenes, and I'm like,
yeah, that's Patty.
Wow. And she giggles, and she's still like in all of this thing. She's just happy. And and then the joy that, you know, I can see you get the joy
Oh yeah.
from
For
her joy enjoying these things happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
and um it's so, to me, it's one of a beautiful thing to watch. There have been moments where I had to go eat a cookie.
Yeah, for sure. For
You
sure.
know,
Honestly, secretly, there's moments where I'm like, I might need to eat a cookie, and I'm doing the scene with that. Like, there's some moments where I'm like, this girl's too twisted even for me. So no, I get it for
yeah,
sure.
it's watching her do, and then like we'll just bounce back and be happy.
Yeah.
And so, how did you two meet, if you don't mind asking?
So we met actually in church. And yeah, as crazy as it sounds, we met in a Methodist church at a kind of a youth group confirmation type class. And one of her favorite stories is initially I was hunting one of her friends. I desperately wanted to date this cheerleader girl. And so we kind of talked a little bit, but nothing major. I went off to military school because I was a very bad child. And went off for about a year, came back, and randomly found her in a English class in high school. Asked her out. She said no. I'm pretty sure it was paybacks for wanting to date her friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was paybacks. But after homecoming, we got back together, and it's been together ever since. So we're coming up on our 20-year anniversary.
Yeah, I look at you two, because whenever I see relationships, especially, you know, in this community, you don't really think of the longevity of it, right. You know, and because you don't see very many long term relationships.
Yeah, for sure.
And people who have, you know, because you guys weren't kinky together, didn't start out in this kinky, you know. You guys kind of both grew into this together.
Yeah.
And so what was that like? What was, you know, who said, hey, I want to try this depraved shit first?
I would say it would probably have been me. We started out with just kind of interjecting porn mags because we hit that age where we could go to Cirillas and buy porn mags under the table. And so it was like, hey, this looks really hot. And we thumb through it together, and then we watched porn videos, and we're like, oh, this is cool. And then I think at one point I saw something that I was like, hey, I want to try that. Let me tie you up. Or, hey, let me put you on the bed and pour wax on you. Right? And so we tried that. Fun note. Educate yourself about wax play, because Yankee candles are horrible to do for wax play. I know this personally because Patty got a bright idea when we were young that, oh, you want wax play? Yeah, let's give you wax play. And she reached over and grabbed the Yankee candle that was sitting on top of her bedpost and poured it on me. And I about came unglued because that wax was way too hot. So we didn't know a whole lot at that age, but we just wanted to experience in any way that we could. And so we were mimicking what we were seeing in the porn industry or what we could find on the internet at the time, which honestly wasn't a lot. And we just kind of evolved from there, trial and error. And so you'll hear a lot of my stories come back to, we didn't have teachers, we just did. And for better or for worse, we knew that we would make it better next time, hopefully.
Well, and I think that is, to me, having that foundation of you had the relationship established first, and then you brought these things in to the relationship, and I'm sure that there were things that you were like, yeah, this is cool, this is awesome, I want to do this, right. And then there were things that y'all were like, oh no, we won't do that again, you know.
Well, now I got a good story for that.
Go for it.
All right. So I got a wild hair up my butt one day, and I was like, baby, I want you to do something super dirty to me, as fucked up as you can get. Go find the most fucked up thing you can find. She's like, all right. So she gets on the internet. I did not communicate as well as I probably should have in that moment, because she goes and finds on the internet, and so we have a really hot time, and she found something called snowballing. Was not prepared to be snowballed. Do you know what snowballing is?
I think I know what snowballing is, but go ahead for those who don't know.
She put it in, or she allowed me to come in her mouth, and then she spit it into my mouth while I was blindfolded and swapped it. I was not prepared for that. It was like, you know, communication had better get better really fast.
You were like, that's never
not, again.
Not a thing I want to do.
No.
Now that does bring me to another question. I don't know why it brings me to this question, but it does. you consider yourself to be queer.
For sure.
Um, and I've oftentimes gotten that wrong with you because when I met you a year ago, they were like Athens is heterosexual,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like this has kind of evolved in the last year.
Okay. Sure.
What brought that about?
So queer culture for me and how I identify is sexually queer.
Okay.
So I present very heterosexual, heteronormative in the way that I act. But what I find sexually active is the entire spectrum. I don't care if you're non-binary. I don't care if you're trans. I don't care if you're straight. I don't care if you're gay. If you're sexy, you're hot, and that energy is there, I'm absolutely down to clown in any way, shape, or form. Queer culture originally, from what I've read and what I understand it to be, is they were somewhat the other guys in the LGBTQ.
Okay.
So you were lesbian, you were gay, you were bi, you were trans, and then there was the queer culture. A lot of the queer culture evolved into the non-binary culture, and what that looks like, because there wasn't a name for non-binary at the time,
right?
And so they were kind of just typecasted as, oh, you're queer. So for me, I take that mantle as queer because I'm not typecasted. I refuse to be typecasted. For me, I am sexually queer. I will do whatever with whoever, whenever, however, as long as the energy is right. And so that doesn't really fit in any of the LGBT or the het things.
Right. It's not, because it's not as simple as like I'm bisexual,
right,
or this or that.
For sure.
I have a friend that I've mentioned on here before in other shows who is heterosexual but bi-romantic.
For sure. Absolutely.
Which it took me a while to figure that out.
Yeah.
Because there's so many categories, which part of me is like, oh my God, I got to figure this out all over again. But then another part of me is like, it's so cool that there are so many different classifications and things that you can say so that you can drill down.
Absolutely.
Because, when we were coming up, I'm not that much older than you. Mm-hmm. But coming up, it was either you were gay, bi, or, straight.
Absolutely.
And so it was, this was the hole that you were in.
Yep.
And, absolutely. I say all the time, I could go out and, fuck 16 girls tomorrow. I'll be tired, but I'll also still be gay.
Get it done.
You know what I'm saying? I'll still be gay.
Absolutely.
But there is something amazing about having that mind, being like, I don't have to fit into that box that you gave me, and so for someone who is queer, you said you present as, heterosexual, heteronormative, all of those things, but sexually you're down to clown.
Absolutely.
Do you often find that the ability to take off that, is it freeing to take off that heteronormative, thing on the times where you do engage in those activities?
Absolutely. So one of my favorite stories from a queer space was Patty was earning her squirter hanky. And so for her...
You're going to have to explain that.
Okay. So there is a international Miss Leather who created a hanky that identifies people who are squirters, whether you like to make people squirt, which would be on your left side, or if you are the squirting bottom, which would be on your right side. They came up and visited us for a weekend, and Patty knew about the history of the squirter hanky and who developed it and all the things. And so she was like, hey, I would like to have a squirter hanky because I'm a squirter. And she was the international Miss Leather. I was like, well, you can have one, of course, or you can earn it. I was like, I totally want to earn it. Let's do that. So she earned her squirter hanky, and then by the end of the night, I had Patty sucking me off. I had a trans man squirting down Patty's back while their dominant was fist fucking them and yelling at me to bite a nipple. It was the greatest thing ever. There was no real negotiation. It was just this queer orgy of sex and weird going on all at the same time. And I was like, this is that moment where I'm like, no, I'm totally down with all of this.
You're like, all of these things that are happening is great.
It was so good that we had to squeegee the floor at the end.
Nice.
It was amazing. And so I walked out of there, and that's where I got my perception of queer culture and where I identified within that queer spectrum was by that experience and then having very in-depth conversations with them afterwards. So a lot of what BDSM and leather and things do is after a scene you're bound to those people for a little while, and you have the opportunity to learn and share ideas and educate yourself. And so when I left that scene, I was like, this is exactly what I want. I don't care where you sit on the spectrum. If you're hot and your energy's amazing, and
then let's do it.
Let's get after it.
Has there ever been prior to, your queer awakening,
Sure.
Was there ever a time where you were like, I really want to play with this person, but I don't want to be perceived as, gay or queer or bisexual or anything
Absolutely.
like that?
I think it's natural, especially in the heteronormative vanilla society where gay culture is often rejected or looked down upon. I think if you're grown up in that hyper strict relationship, like with my dad, where this is how you're supposed to be as a man and as a human, and you don't deviate. I distinctly remember an opportunity to fist a boy, and I had that split second of, all my leather brothers are around. What would they think if I was fisting this boy? What ended up happening is I fisted the boy anyway, and absolutely had a great time.
So, one of my, and you can reject this claim
for sure,
that I have come up with is people in kink are never as straight as they say they are,
for sure,
and never quite as gay as they say they are.
For sure. Okay.
Just because I have seen in a lot of spaces that I've been in, and I've only been in the community about a year,
Absolutely.
people who definitely flag hetero.
Uh-huh.
And they're married, or they're this or they're
Right.
that, and like everything about their lives says I am a straight man or I'm a straight woman, but if there's a chance to dip their toe in that pool,
For sure.
they're gonna dip their toe in the pool just to see if the water is warm.
Well, and you got to look at it from a societal standpoint. Like, people for so long have been told that being gay or straight or whatever is either good or bad or positive or negative. But people are more multifaceted than that.
Right.
So if they've created this life for them that is, quote, heteronormative, 2.5 kids, has the house, the car, the job, and all the things, but never been allowed to express themselves in any other manner than maybe just clickbait on porn in the middle of the night when everybody's asleep. They haven't explored that enough, so of course they're going to want to.
Right.
And why the fuck not? Just go out and figure out exactly who you are.
Listen, you might like a little finger in the booty.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, go for it.
You might like a little more than the finger in the booty. I say, hey, do what you got to do.
Absolutely.
It is, and you have been in situations with cis men before.
For sure.
I don't know how far that you've done down that rabbit hole, but I do know I've seen some images of you, like, scening at least with men. We've done a scene together.
Fuck yeah, we did.
It was amazing. It was actually
so
my first scene, and I think one of the things you mentioned earlier, that when you do a scene with someone, it bonds you to them.
Absolutely.
And I think I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. And for those who don't know, I'll tell the story a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the first times that I met, actually I think it was the first time I met you.
Yep. Within the first 30 minutes.
Within the first 30 minutes, you were like, I want to set you on fire. And I was like,
a good pickup line too. Yeah, it's good.
The fuck? Like, I was straight up offended. For as I was like, what about me makes you think that I want to be set on fire?
Because everybody wants to be set on fire.
And, after some cajoling from other people who were like, no, if anyone is going to do that, this is the person to do that.
I appreciate that.
It is, you'll be safe. Like, he's going to take care of you. And, I was like, and then you said, why the fuck not? And I was like, and I thought about it for a while, and you were like, if you really want to, send me a message. And then I was like, all right, I'll send a message. I sent the message, and you were like, what do you want to do? Let's figure this out. And you made me feel so comfortable, that I could, even in the discussion phase, that like at any point in time, I could be like, nah.
Yeah, for sure.
Nope, no, I thought this was cool, something I wanted, it wasn't. And then by the time that day came, you know, I had felt so comfortable with you in that at that time that it was like, all right, cool, let's do this.
Yeah.
And then you turned on the devious side. You were like, that's when they, oh man, fuck you up. Oh man, you about to be in trouble. And I was like, then I started to get the fear.
But that's the game for sure. Absolutely.
And it was like, okay, all right. And like, there was a split second where I was like, where you were starting to get stuff ready, and I was like, do I really want to do this? Like, am I making a terrible error? You know, and
how did my life choices get me?
Yeah, like where did I go? Sure. Where did I go left when I should have went right? Like,
for sure.
But you know, the whole time I felt comfortable. You made sure that I was okay.
Yeah,
you know, and I felt like in that moment, although we were doing a scene together, it wasn't about you. No. You know, you made that scene about me and making sure that I was good and making sure that, like, you know, that Athens Owned had my back and that we were, like, I felt safer than I have felt in, you know, any other exploratory scene or anything like that than I've been with. And I'm like, that is, it made me, in a way, it spoiled me because now I'm like, oh, you know, I went to this place that shall not be named one time, and they were doing some demos, and they were like, yeah, let's do some fire play, and I was like, what I won't be doing is in here with y'all. Right on. Because I don't trust any of y'all. Yeah. I don't see any safety protocols happening. I don't see no shit going down. It just looks like y'all are just go for what you know. And I will not, and I mean not, be a part of that.
Absolutely. No,
you know, and yeah, but now my standards are so high. But part of it is the me coming in and COVID happening and all of that stuff. You know, I got to hang out with the heavy hitters. You know, and so it was like, oh no, I'm not playing with you little folk. But I also am like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not there. I don't have the bona fides to be like, hey, you know, heavy hitters, let's play, let's do stuff.
So the way I look at it, if I may,
of course,
never put yourself in a position to be like, I'm not good enough, I'm not ready for this, whatever. Always put yourself in the position or the perspective of, it's not my time on my journey, but I could get there at some point.
Yes.
Because I didn't walk in and know fire play out the yang the way I do the first day I showed up. I didn't even know it the first year. I would venture to say even right now, there's still more to learn for me on fire play.
And you teach it.
And I teach it. So at no point should a bottom, top, anybody say, hey, I'm not good enough for this. It should be, it's just not right for my journey at this moment.
So let's talk about, for 1 second, go back and talk about your fire play journey, because that is kind of what you're known for.
Yeah.
Is that something that you found online, or like, I want to try this?
No. So it actually got to a point in our vanilla-ish, French vanilla, I guess, pervy life, where we were like, surely we are not the only twisted people that were into any of this stuff that we were reading in videos or magazines or whatever. There has to be somebody out there. And so we got on the famous Google and typed in like BDSM, sex club, whatever, and a place came up called Indulge. And what came up to us was they had a BDSM dungeon on one side and a swing dungeon or swing place on the other side. We can experience both worlds in one night and figure out where we sit, right? So we show up to this event and we go and we do a little exhibitionism and we do a little voyeurism on the swing side, and we're like, not really our thing. Let's go check out the dungeon. So we went over and saw the dungeon, and we walked in and we watched a couple of scenes, and very quiet and respectful, and it was a good feeling. And then this dominant comes up and goes, excuse me, can I light your girl on fire? And that moment where you were like, what is Athens asking me, was that moment for me. I was like, what in the hell are you trying to do?
Do you know how to tear you up in
yeah, I was ready to fight. And I looked out of the corner of my eye, and Patty's like, "You're gonna light me on fire? Yes, let's do that."
She's
And so like my super macho, let's go to the mattresses was like, well, I guess we're here for it. Let's do the thing. You're crazy. You're crazy woman. You're just crazy. So she got White Rain Play, which is a foaming mousse that's used for hair products. I mean, I use it a lot.
Yeah. All the time.
All the time. I should buy stock in it. But they did some White Rain Play. We left the venue that night and started talking about it on the way home, and it was, sir, that was amazing. We have to do that. We have to do that. Like, all right, cool. So I started with a plate and hair mousse, like a ceramic plate, and started making designs, learning how the fire moved and all the things. And at some point, you get to the thing where she looks at you and goes, "I'm ready," and you jump into the abyss together and just see where it goes. Unfortunately, I didn't have a mentor. The closest fire top to Kansas City at the time was Sir Sligo out in St. Louis, and he would come up once every 3 months or so to do a demo at the local venue. So I didn't have a lot of interaction. So a lot of the fire stuff we learned just by word of mouth, or we read something, or we tried to figure it out the best we could. And
how many times did you burn the mattress?
Oh God, have you heard these stories? All right, so the very first time we did White Rain Play, we put Patty on the mattress because she was comfortable and it was a nice non-hard place for her to lay. Apparently, we put a little bit too much White Rain. There's a pillow a little close, and we singed the comforter. So that was a good story. We learned not to do that. Another one is petroleum jelly is actually very highly flammable, and if you put it on a cotton ball and you light it and then you try to slap the stick, it'll stick to things. Yeah, lit it, was like, oh shit, hit the stick along the cotton ball, it hit the fence and stuck to the fence, and we had a nice little singe on the fence. So, I mean, there's lots of stories like that, and I love to tell those stories because I'm hoping that in my classes people learn from my mistakes and my stupidity and not do those, because they do have some very real ramifications.
Right.
Like, we could have burnt the house down on the bed. Like,
and I think that's one of the things why I was so like, whoa, what are y'all doing? When they were just randomly pulling people up to do fire play. I was like, do you not know? Like, this is like the Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah, for sure.
This ain't nothing to fuck with. Like, you can't just do that.
For sure.
And I think it's as a person who, I still consider myself a baby in the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because COVID.
I do too, so I totally get it.
Yeah, because COVID happened and, you know, we all shut down. Nobody did anything. And so it's, you know, I look at this like I was able to learn from people who A, knew what they were doing, and B, knew things that were safe and the safe way to do things. So I'm not going to just try shit out.
Absolutely.
For the sake of trying shit out. Because that's how you end up at the ER.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I don't want to be on an episode of Sex Sent Me to the ER.
For sure. No, I get it.
So let's kind of move over into the leather side. Okay. So were you leather before you were kinky, or did that they just kind of happen in tandem?
No, I would say I was kinky well before I knew what leather was. And
okay.
So we've already kind of talked about some of the hierarchies and the structure that I've had in my past. So I would say that those things lended themselves to leather, but I didn't know what leather was. I had no idea. So my first leather interaction was getting chastised by an old master with a Scottish accent and a kilt. Like, it was great. So it was my very first event. I sat outside the event for about 45 minutes looking at Athens Zone going, do we really want to do this? Are we sure we're ready to do this? Whatever. Like, okay, we'll go. So we went inside, and you've been around me, and probably some of your listeners have been around me for a while, know that I'm a little bit overexcitable and a little bit over the top. Just by a little bit.
He's like a puppy. It's the cutest thing.
Yeah, I get real excited real easy. So we go in, and I did the thing. I was like, they're beating people. They're spanking. These are like live porn magazines. This is live porn. This is great. And so I would go up and I'd shake hands, and I would stand in people's scenes and go, oh my God, this is amazing. And all of a sudden I felt a tap on my shoulder, and I turned around, and there was Master Wu. And Master Wu looks at me, and I'm going to try my best with the accent, but I'm going to butcher it. You done fucked up, young man. And so he grabbed me, and he takes me to the table of the leadership of the time for CKC. And I get to sit with all these people who have been doing this for 20 plus years and hear their stories and protocols and standard etiquette. And after that event, I would end up going to Woo and going, hey, I wanted to say thank you very much for that. I certainly appreciate the opportunity. I get a message the very next day with, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. Let's talk. And we talked for 6 months. We read leather articles from like Guy Baldwin and all these big names. And we would discuss them and just through email, like hundreds of emails of just chatting. And then one day he was like, hey, have you thought of yourself as leather? And that was the moment where I had to stop and go, does leather's values or my perceived leather values match and align with my personal leather values or values that I grew up with? And for me, it found it absolutely. So then we started forming a leather family down in Wichita. Ultimately, that grew to Kansas City, and then that grew into Springfield, and it grew up to, at one point, I think we had 25 to 30 dominants and another 42 submissives.
And that is bloodline.
Bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And so my leather journey from its inception was education right out of the gate. And then how does that align with me? And how does that align with what I'm trying to do in the community? Or what am I trying to do personally?
And one of the things that I think that I admire about you, you know, because this is the Athens fan club hour, is that not only do you enjoy the education aspect of giving the education, you're also able to take education.
Absolutely.
You know, it is a continuously learning journey for you as well. And I think that's one of those things that like you're still growing and you're learning into things and you freely give information out.
Absolutely.
You know, so often, especially in that where I've seen is that people get information and they want to hold on to it. You know, that's mine and I got this and it was, you know, it's my toy and I will show it to you, but I won't tell you about it. Yeah. You know, and you big for some competition or whatever that case may be. Right. You don't do that. You're just like, look, I learned this thing yesterday and it was fucking amazing.
Well, hell yeah.
And so here, let me show you this thing that I learned because it's fucking amazing and I want you to be a part of it too.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what sets you apart from maybe some other DOMs or teachers or DOMs in the area is that willingness to just learn and also teach.
Absolutely. So if you stop learning, you're dead. There's no point anymore. If you're not learning about yourself, about your surroundings, about the people around you, if you're not learning something, then you might as well just kick the bucket. There's no point. And from a teaching standpoint, I distinctly remember like going back to the early days before the community, doing just about everything I could wrong. Like looking back at it now, I'm like, yeah, I'm surprised we didn't die.
You gotta get it wrong before you get it right.
But every step of the way, I've had people either willing to teach or talk to me about these concepts or theories or thought processes, or willing to show me or help me. It would only do them injustice if I did not share that with other people. There's a statement that was made by an old Leatherman that I met down in Dallas that said, you know, me teaching you this, whatever this is, and then you turning around teaching it to the next person and telling them where you got it from allows me to live forever.
Mm-hmm.
And that really struck a chord with me because a lot of people, when they get older, will I be remembered? Will I be forgotten? What does the future hold? Well, if you're passing down knowledge to the next generation and the next generation, then are you ever really forgotten?
It's how you build your legacy.
Absolutely. So for me, I'm like, I'll teach you anything you want. You want to learn how to fish? We'll do that. You want to be learned how to cut open? Let's do that together. Like, let's do the things.
Yeah, he's been trying to fist me for a long time, and I'm resisting.
I'm getting good at it. Really good at it. I saw a YouTube video once.
You know, it's. But so let's kind of switch gears a little bit because I want to move into one of the things that goes into you learning stuff.
Okay.
Surprisingly, guys, this man here is in the ballroom scene.
With the best of them.
He is a ball girl.
Yeah.
He has walked a ball and snatched a trophy.
I have. And judged one.
And judged one.
Yeah,
you know.
Judged one. That was cool.
And I think as I grew up with Paris is Burning and what the history of the ballroom scene was as the escape for these black and brown queer people to just like live the fantasy of being not oppressed as the best way to put it.
For sure.
And so for you as this white guy,
so white on pink.
Yeah. And it's not to say that there weren't white people in
for sure
and before, but there were straight people and before, but I don't think I've ever seen a heteronormative presenting white male in the ballroom scene.
For sure. It was a wild road to get there too. So it started out, to tell one story, I kind of have to tell another story.
Go for it. Tell as many stories as you want.
I was fisting a boy who was a part of... Yeah, here we are. Who was a part of the Pride Committee in 2019. And he was like, hey, what do you want? We need something to do, something special. And we came up with a parade that was a grassroots movement, hopefully to evolve into a full-on parade. And so we had a meeting. And that meeting consisted of me as a leather representative, that boy as the representative for the Pride Board, and then the ballroom community. And we were planning this parade. And I was like, you guys move way differently than I do. And when I say move differently, they glide across the floor. They don't move across. They don't walk. They don't do the linebacker walk. They glide across. I mean, it was fabulous. It was a beautiful thing. I was like, where did you learn this? Like, how are you here? Like, what got you here? And they're like, well, we're the ballroom community. You should come check us out. And we'll invite you to a ball. And I remember looking at Xavier William going, are we going to waltz?
Yeah.
Are we going to foxtrot?
Like,
what dance do I need to learn? And I can literally see him look at me like, oh, white boy. Like,
you sweet summer child.
God bless your heart.
God bless your pale little heart, girl.
And my fisting bottom, who has been a part of that community a little bit, was laughing his ass off at me. He's like, you're getting an education. You need to go to this. And so we showed up at one of the arcades here in Kansas City that had a viewing room to watch Pose. And I showed up, and literally you could have heard a pin drop. Like, everybody who was there was like, who in the holy hell is this white boy? And why is he here? And it was through just being introduced by Xavier and getting to just showing up consistently, like regardless of what was going on. How can I help? Do I need to stay to help clean up? Can I help set up? Whatever the case might be. That over about 6 weeks, they finally warmed up to me and was like, all right, let's see what you got. Well, what do you mean? You've been here. You've seen how we vote. Get out on the floor and vote.
You better walk a ball. It's time to walk a ball.
And so I went out and I walked, and they got a pretty good laugh at it. And then from there, I mean, they started inviting me to more and more things, and I started helping out the best that I could.
And I think it's one of the things I think it's interesting, because I have known about the ball community forever, sure. But I had never actually been to a ball.
Oh, yeah.
And I was super excited when you were like, no, we're doing the inclusion ball, blah, blah, blah. It's great. Like, we're going to do it. And I wish I did not get a migraine and I could stay, because I was going to walk.
Oh, hell yeah.
I had planned on walking, but my head was like, but the thing I have to remember about balls, and I make the joke all the time, the balls are late, but they're never boring.
Yeah. 100%.
It is when you say when the doors open at 8, they say doors open at 7, ball starts at 8. They really mean ball starts at 11:30.
For sure. Absolutely.
And it is a part of that is for if you don't know, part of that is for security.
Absolutely.
100%. And it's always been that way. I remember when watching Paris is Burning. If you've never seen it and you're interested in the ball culture, Pose is great. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah. Paris is Burning.
But Paris is Burning is like, it is really getting the essence of what this is about, and why it's important and something that needs to be preserved.
Absolutely.
And and having people who are allies, you know,
For sure.
preserving it, you know, is important. And I think my biggest question, as far as you in that scene is concerned, is knowing that that is a space. Here on KC Caffeine, we talk about, you know, being the other, you know, being in places where you are the avatar for your people. And I think in the ball scene, you literally, like, you're the avatar. You're the one white dude that they're like, you can come and hang out. It's cool.
Let's go to the barbecue.
You can go to the barbecue.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And how does that feel? Like, it's got to be. I know how I feel when I go to mainly white spaces.
Yeah.
And there's this level of like, I gotta make sure I'm on my best behavior.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know what I'm saying? Because I don't want to be the reason that they're like, see, this is why we don't let this in there anyway. You know, how does that feel being on the other side of that coin?
I tell you what, it's a trippy thing. So when I hear my POC friends, brothers, and sisters talk about that specifically, until I got into the ballroom, I couldn't really relate. Because ultimately, most of my culture and most of where things are at is there's a small minority of POC members. Until I got to the ballroom, and I got to be, as you say, the avatar. I mean, it was a weird experience, and it's almost undescribable of realizing that you are one person in a sea of people that don't have a shared experience with you. And so for me, I walked in and I was humbled as much as I could about everything. Very much thank you, mind my P's and Q's, help as much as I can. Realize that them or that community allowing me into that space was them testing the waters with me, and that what I present to them will dictate how my experience will go. That I, just because I show up, don't automatically get accepted to it.
Right.
And so it took a good 6 weeks before that community warmed up to me just being in their space. It took another probably 3 months of just talking and getting to know people, and people getting to know me, and realizing that I'm not there for any other reason than to learn. And that was a big key phrase, was I'm willing to teach you anything from my culture that you want to know. Only ask in response that if I ask a question, that you give me an honest answer about your culture. And so it stopped becoming he's a white guy, we're POC, or he's a het guy and we're trans or whatever. And it became a, what dirty shit are you doing this weekend? Can we see pictures? And then same on the opposite end, like explain the history to me, like how did this fabulousness come to be?
Right.
And so it stopped being anything about gender or identity or race or anything. It came solely an avenue to share information with each other. And then at some point it became, why don't you come out to a ball and really see what this was at? And so I took Master Okinawa and I took Mistress Elliott, and we showed up at this thing. We had a stupid amount of fun, and we were accepted almost the minute we walked in the door, and it was an amazing feeling.
Right.
So I talk about all the time, like the parallels of the ball culture and the leather culture throughout history parallel each other, but just with two different lenses in their glasses. They went through the AIDS crisis. They went through being ostracized. They went through a Stonewall. They did all of these things. Just with a different perspective. So it's been a lot of fun, like bouncing back and forth, like, hey, we have this structure. Do you have something similar? Oh yeah, but we call it this. And so it's become a surrogate family, so to speak. Like we have our culture, you have your culture, but we cross and we do the barbecues and we have a lot of fun, and we're teaching and you're teaching, and we're just celebrating who we are, regardless of what the rest of the world has to say.
Right. Well, I think the biggest thing for me when I how my journey into leather essentially kind of comes, the through line is my idea of ballroom in the houses, because it's leather has families. You have your leather families, and then the balls, they have the houses. You know what I'm saying? And essentially both of those things, especially, you know, at their inception, was about survival. You know, and you know, it's two different sides of the LGBT coin. You know, and I always find it interesting that leather has, you know, from my experience, morphed into this kind of like heteronormative thing, where in the beginning it was very gay. You know what I mean? It was very gay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And part of me, there's a part of me that fears that the ball culture will kind of turn that same way.
It's possible, yeah.
You know, because you have the RuPaul's Drag Race, and so they're taking terms that come from the ball culture and kind of making it mainstream.
Absolutely.
And it's not what I find, and we're gonna get into the pride thing in a minute because I have strong opinions on pride
For sure.
as in general, but it is that when it has been when you come into a situation when you do something that is based in survival and you know a counterculture and it becomes, I hate to say the term hetero washed,
Okay.
but that's the term that I'll use because it's easier that way. You know, you kind of lose something magical in it.
Okay.
And what my worry is that not you, but as you bring,
I get it.
you know, as ball culture becomes more mainstream,
Absolutely.
you'll lose something we'll lose that magic and that spark that makes ball what it is
Absolutely.
right now. You know what I mean?
So I think every organization and every community throughout time has always evolved. Whether it was evolving for the better or for the worse, they always evolve. What I've found in most communities that I enter into and have had the privilege of getting to see behind the scenes is there's always going to be a public face and private face. I will get invited to an inclusion ball, but I might not necessarily get invited to maybe one of their house meets because I'm not needed there.
Right.
And so I think that what you're talking about is what you're seeing on the public face and maybe not what you're seeing behind the scenes.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
So the idea and the big message I get from ballroom community is ball is for everybody who's willing to step into that arena. It doesn't matter whether you're heteronormative or trans or POC or any of these other things. If you have enough balls to step out on that floor and walk it, you're welcome.
Unless you get chopped. Well, no, I think they don't do chops anymore.
Yeah, they do chops.
Okay.
Yep, we chopped a couple of people. So
some people you might get chopped.
You might get chopped, and so it's one of those things. The big thing that I get for that community is if you got enough guts to get out there and do the damn thing, then you absolutely belong there.
Okay.
So,
and it's so I want to end on this last note here for Pride.
Okay.
Because you said you were involved in the Pride parade, and
2019.
Let's talk about how that came about,
Okay.
and also how you as like I when I look at it, I think about it like here's this, you know, although you identify as queer now,
Sure.
here's this heteronormative man who is just busting down these walls and doing the work.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
so, like, how did you get involved in the Pride Parade itself?
So literally, the story is
you're fisting a boy.
I was fisting a boy. Like literally, that's how it started. He was a part of KCDC, I believe, at the time, which was the ones that were organizing Pride as a whole. We were doing it in a sling, and I'm not sure if him asking this question means that I was doing a terrible job at fisting, because we probably shouldn't have been talking during that moment if it was really good. Now that I look back on it, I'm like, But anyway, he was like, you know, we haven't done something special in Pride other than this event where we have a stage and we have vendors and things like that. I want to do something special, memorable. What could we do that would bring the communities together? And so during the fisting scene, it was legitimately like, well, what about this idea? Well, no, that wouldn't work. What about this idea? Well, no, that wouldn't work. Turn your head and cough. We'll go a little deeper. What about this idea? Right? And so, yeah, it was good, right? You just had that mental image.
I did.
Yeah. Anyway, and we landed on a parade. Everybody likes a parade. It's hard to get mad at each other during a parade because you get to go and be visible and excited and things. So then the next thing was, well, we don't have permits. We don't have the cash or the bankroll to do this Pride parade. And time, honestly, we're about a month and a half out. How do we do a parade? And so we decided a grassroots movement, which was we're going to show up at the event. We're going to start at one end of the complex and walk the other end of the complex. Well, that's great. We'll all look pretty. We'll hold signs, but what else could we do? And so I got linked into the Visibility Project, which has every kink and sexuality and gender identifying pride flag you can think of. I think there's like 42 flags that they'll show you. for a donation. It's an LLC. And so we put flags on poles and we gave them out to everybody that showed up for the march. And we marched from one end to the other. I think it was like 800 yards or something like that, almost a mile. And it was, the whole hope was to inspire people enough that we could have the following year a much bigger, actual in the streets type pride parade. Fortunately, COVID had a different idea about it.
COVID said is you gonna sit your ass down.
Yeah, COVID did not like that. So, but that's how it came to be. Is we wanted something simple and grassroots movement that can show that it can be done at a very low cost and allow people the opportunity or the ability to be seen. And so often in our community, you don't get that. You don't get that hat tip or that recognition or that ideology of, you know what, I'm here and I'm visible and you can't erase me. So that was the motive to the Pride Parade. And so we just got a bunch of groups that we could think of together. And I organized the leather communities. The ballroom brought a bunch of people. Wes brought in some of the church organizations that we're supporting and some other people. And we just formed a giant parade line and just did it, because why the fuck not? Let's absolutely do this.
See, and I love it. I love that idea. One of my opinions on pride, really in gay culture in general, right now, is that we've lost some of the magic of what it meant to be queer and what it meant to be gay.
For sure.
Just because and this can go into a long conversation about gay marriage and blah 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 blah. We've lost that thing that made us funky. You know what I mean? That was like, oh my God, that's weird. We've taken some of the race to be just like everybody else.
For sure.
You know, we've lost the thing that made us special and made us magical. And, you know, seeing the parade, being a part of this last year's parade, I felt for, you know, that hour, that long ass walk, you know what I mean? I felt magical. I felt seen. I felt like, wow, like this is, I had my crown on. I was doing the damn thing. But sure. It felt, I was like, this is what it means. Cause you know, we've got the apps and all that. So you don't have to, I remember coming up, going to the gay bar was like going home, you know, that was like, it was like you would see people that you don't see during the week, but they were like your best friends, and you hung out, you know, that night and had a good old time and partied, because that was a moment where you felt safe.
Absolutely.
And you know, now with like the apps and all of this stuff, you don't see that anymore. Everybody's kind of on their phones,
doing
chilling, doing their grinder thing and all of that. And so, you know, seeing that there was, you know, that you were somebody who was like, look, let's bring the weird back. You know what I mean?
Always down for the weird.
Like I think that's so dope. So, guys, we've been talking for an hour, and and that's I mean, super fast.
Like, oh my gosh.
We could go on and on and on. I do want to have you back on for a part 2, so because I feel like we just scratched the surface of Athens. Because I want to get deep and talk about dirty stuff.
Let's do it. I like dirty stuff.
You know, we're just keeping it.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
For the kids right now. We'll do a late night conversation.
Let's do it for sure.
But is there anything that, how can the people who want to find you find you?
So on FetLife, I'm Sir_Athens 357. On Facebook, I'm Mark Athens is my last name. You can hit me up on any of those social media platforms. Be happy to chat with you about anything. And yeah, that's just the way we get hold of me.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming in and being a part of you have popped my interview cherry.
Aw, I'll take it. I'll keep it right here. I'll put it in my pocket. Hold on, I got it right there.
Yes. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and like. That's how things get. Yes, KC Caffeine After Dark. Rawr. Grr, baby. We're gonna get deep. It's gonna be like an ASMR.
Are we elbow deep?
Gonna get elbow deep. We're gonna go all the way to the shoulder.
Yeah, I can do it.
I mean, I've seen you do some things.
I mean, I know a guy.
I know you know a guy. But don't forget to subscribe, guys. It's how we get to the things that we want to get to. Tomorrow morning, you know, just a little bit of church announcement. You know, we do that at the end of every video.
I got you.
Tomorrow morning we're doing Wake the F Up. it will be with, Danielle again with us in the morning. And we're going to be talking about whatever the fuck happened this week in the news.
I love it.
If you don't have your tickets to the CKC Kinky Camp Out, it's going to be a lot of fun. And you're going to be there doing a demo, doing a teaching.
So I'm going to be teaching fire play, particularly the more extreme stuff. And then after the demo, anyone who wants to try their hand at fire play, whether you're topping or bottoming, I'd be happy to help.
I'm going to put my slot in to have Athens do fire play with me.
Yeah, let's get that done.
On Saturday.
Are we going to do a Roman candle?
No, we've already listened. See, you always want to take it one. You always want to take it one step too far.
You know I love you, baby.
I love you too, but you always want to take it one step too far. One step. Let's see. So there's no Jackbox games this week because I will be in the woods doing fun stuff.
Nasty.
Within reason. This is me we're talking about here. Within reason.
Okay.
Let's see. Don't forget, guys, I do stream on Twitch every night. Video games and talk shit. That's what we do. Tomorrow, Why Not Wednesday at Rhythm and Booze. It's gonna be good. Lots and lots of fun. Make sure we see you guys out. If you don't know where it is, I don't know what to tell you. You should know by now. Thank you to everybody, and thank you once again to Mr. Mark Athens for your wonderful insight.
Oh, thank you for having me.
That's all I got.
That's cool.
Good night, guys, and we'll see you next time on Kansas City Legends.